Welcome to the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. I'm Allie Rose, certified clinical hypnotherapist and subconscious success coach. I help my clients stop self-sabotage and feel safe to create more wealth, worth, and wellness from within. If you find yourself stuck repeating the same unhelpful patterns in your life, health, business, or relationships, even after all the mindset work, this podcast is for you. Each week, you'll hear deep dives into the hidden beliefs shaping your life and live hypno coaching sessions where someone shifts a block in real time. Because willpower isn't the problem, your subconscious story is. And when you shift it at the root, everything else begins to change. So let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. I've been thinking a lot lately about how much time we spend calculating what change might cost us. We think about the money, the risk, the time, the discomfort, the possibility that we could make the wrong decision or disappoint someone, lose something, or invest in ourselves and still not get the outcome we wanted. And those are real things to consider. But I don't think we asked the other question nearly enough. What is it already costing me to stay exactly where I am? Because staying the same isn't free. It just usually doesn't come with a clear price tag. So today, Safiya and I are having a really honest conversation about the cost of staying the same. Obvious costs, the hidden ones, and what happens when you finally realize that not changing has become more expensive than the change itself. Safiya, so happy to have you here. How are you
Yeah,
feeling about diving into this?
I'm really excited about this topic. This is something that I have thought about a lot over the years in different ways. And so I'm so curious to see how what I've been thinking about and what you've been thinking about converge in this conversation. So yeah, it's gonna be good. So yeah, let's have a think about the cost of staying the same. Let's first start by asking, what do you mean by the cost of staying the same? Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I think most people hear the word cost and immediately think about money. They
Mm.
immediately think about what it would cost to finally do the thing that they've been saying that they're going to do for years, whether that means that they would have to invest some time or they would have to invest money. We become so focused on the visible price of changing that we completely miss what not changing is already costing us. Because maybe you don't spend the money on support, but you lose an entire year going in circles. Maybe you
Mm.
leave the job because the paycheck feels safe, but you're paying for it with your energy or your health or your creativity, or you avoid the uncomfortable conversation because you don't want to risk the relationship. But that resentment is changing the relationship anyway. So you're losing yourself and you're losing the relationship anyway. So staying the same isn't free, but there isn't the same receipt as if you invest in something.
It makes perfect sense. And one of the first things I thought about when you said this and when I saw the topic, I think about currency. I've
Mm.
been talking to some work friends recently about currency because I think you said people think about money, whereas to me, I think about currency. And your currency could be money, but it could be your time, as you said, it could be your energy, it could be your peace of mind,
Yeah.
which to me could be priceless. It
Yes.
be your physical health, it could be your mental health, it could be your creativity, it could be an opportunity cost.
Right.
That to me is something that people don't necessarily think about. If I stay the same, I may lose out on an opportunity that I may have had if I made a change. So to me, whenever I think of the cost of staying the same, it's always like the currency that is costing you to stay the same may not be the same currency that it costs you to change.
Right.
And so to me, it's thinking about what is it costing me and seeing that the two things may be compatible. It may be you're thinking about how much it costs financially and how much you might lose financially staying the same, but it may be that your loss is something completely different that may actually be worth a lot more than money.
Absolutely. Right. So I have been referencing the silent retreat moment that changed everything for me. And really, what it changed for me in a really big way is that we can always make more money. I will have opportunities to make more money, but I can never get back time,
Mhm.
time with the people that I love. And so I think that starts to happen whenever you start losing people in your life. You realize, well, maybe I decided to place more importance on my business or my work because I didn't weigh out the cost of continuing to perpetuate some sort of cycle that I was in that didn't allow me to spend the quality time with people in the way that I wanted to. And so that for me was a really big thing is I'm young enough where I can always make more money, but I can never get back time with people that I love. So I think that you're totally right. I'm really asking people to look at the whole bill,
Yes.
not just the dollar amount attached to the change, right? It's like, let's look at this holistically about what it's costing you to stay the same.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And why do you think people do that? Why do you think it's people jump to calculate the cost of change without considering the cost of staying the same?
I think that one bill is visible and the other can often be invisible because I think so often we've been living inside the pattern. We've been living inside something for so long that you almost don't even realize until you actually sit down intentionally and think about it, how much something is costing you. So oftentimes the cost of change has a price tag. You know what you'll have to invest. You can see that number in your bank account, or you can see that number in terms of the time that you might have to invest or the risk that you're going to have to take. But the cost of staying the same is much harder to measure because it gets spread out over weeks and months and years. You don't
Mm.
wake up one morning and suddenly realize that you've lost your confidence or your joy. It happens slowly enough that it starts to feel normal. And our brains are wired to prioritize immediate discomfort over long term consequences. We naturally focus on the pain that is right in front of us
Yeah.
versus over those longer term consequences.
Yeah, and also I think sometimes, like you talked about how one is immediate and the other one is spread out. And I think sometimes even though you might be able to anticipate the other one, it's so far away that, as you said, it's that immediacy that you're focusing on. So you're focusing on this immediate problem. What is this costing me right now versus what is it costing me over time? Because I think we can almost become blind to how we will feel in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I definitely would agree with that. So let's think about some of that. I call it currency. You obviously you talk about those bills. Let's think about the hidden bills that people are already paying. So what are some examples of those?
Yeah, I think they're the things that we don't realize that we've just started accepting as just the way life is. It's the Sunday night anxiety that I hear a lot of people talk about before work that you've convinced yourself that everyone has. It's how exhausted you are from holding everything together or how much mental energy that you spend replaying conversations and overthinking decisions and trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Some of those bills are emotional, some are physical, some are financial, right?
Well, I often think of it in terms of resources. We have a number of resources that are available to us: our time, our energy, our money, our relationships, our whatever. And we are always using those resources up in one way or another. And sometimes what we think we're saving in one, we're using in another. That's the best way that I can think of it.
Yeah.
So I may think to myself like, "Oh, this is great. I stayed late at work every day, and that means that I'm building up." It may not be money because you may not be getting overtime. Like I think about my current job now. If I stayed at work till 9 p.m. every day, I'm not going to get paid anymore. That's not how my job works. But I might be thinking, oh, I'm going to build favor with my manager because I've done all these extra things or whatever it is. But I may also be losing time that I could be spending working on my health or that I could be spending connecting with a friend or that type of thing.
Well, it's almost like you're investing at work, but
Mhm.
by over investing at work, you're taking from your health.
Yes.
Taking You're taking from your relationships because in a lot of ways, outside of money, which I think we can always make more, and I know that it's not always that simple or easy, but in terms of our peace or our energy or our health, our energy is finite. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much that we can push through. So when you're investing in one area or overly investing in one area, you're taking from another area in your life, right?
Yes, that is it. That's exactly what it is. And I think it's always worth remembering that there is a cost to everything.
Yes.
There is a cost to everything. I always remember years ago going to my GP, we're talking about health related stuff, and she said she always says to her patients, everything has a cost.
Yes.
It could be, would you rather be paying your money? Would you rather be paying your time? Would you rather be paying with your health? What would you rather be paying with? She said she'll have that conversation with clients when she says to them maybe to buy an extra supplement or have a particular type of ingredient or whatever. And they're like, this thing is expensive. And she's like, everything has a cost. You're paying the supermarket or you're paying the doctor or you're paying with your health. Do you know what I mean? So it is thinking about that big picture.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely think that way of looking at it.
And so instead of just looking at the money that we might have to invest in things, it's like you think that you're saving, but what is it costing you long term to not invest in said thing?
Yeah, definitely. We talked a little bit about the hidden bills that people are already paying. What is the long-term impact of not weighing those costs up? The fact that it's a calculation that people don't make often, we don't necessarily think about the actual impact. I guess what I'm thinking about is, like, you talked about your silent retreat and the sort of the impact that it had on you is realizing, like, I cannot get this time back with that person. And it may be that you don't realize that until that time has gone. So I always think about I used to have this idea about retirement. I used to have this idea about retirement. And when I retire, I'll do this and I'll do that and all of that. And I remember reading somewhere, I was reading a book and they were talking about this idea that, like, when you retire, you may have more time, but you may not have the energy that you had when you were 40. You may not have the financial means that you had when you were earning money regularly. That time has gone, that as in that time in your life. And so sometimes I think it is realizing the impact that staying the same has had on you may only come after the fact, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, so when you say about my own realization, or even I think people who maybe spend all of their time working, but not investing in their relationship with their children or waiting until retirement, but then they lose their health. I think that there's a grief that comes up. I don't think that we talk about it enough as a culture. I think there's a moment for a lot of people when you look back and realize, "Oh, I've been living this way for 10 years or 20 years, or I thought that I was going to be able to do X, Y, or Z." And there's this wave of sadness, not just for the time that's passed, but for maybe the version of themselves that really never got a chance.
Mhm.
Right? So, sometimes I think that the temptation can be to beat yourself up and to think, "I should have known sooner," or "I've wasted so much time." But, you know me, I don't believe in shaming ourselves. I don't think that that's the most helpful question, but I think that you can use it again as information of, "Okay, I'm at this point now, and I'm looking back and I'm realizing that I have this grief over maybe what I was investing in when I and what I was taking, what it was costing me in other areas of my life. How do I want to move forward from this moment differently based on the grief that I'm feeling? Because all we ever really have is this moment. We can't go back and change things, but we can learn. And I think we can let ourselves grieve the years that we spent doing whatever thing, investing in something else and not in these other areas. And so let me give it like a clear example of, say that someone has spent all of their time investing in their work and they recognize once they've now retired that they have no relationships because they invested all of their time in work. There might be a grief that comes with that, but what do you do with that grief? Do you beat
Mhm.
yourself up about it, or do you determined to make the rest of your life so that you are investing more in relationship now.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, and that's that regret piece, and how do you what do you do with it? What do you do with that regret that you might be feeling? Like you said, using it to take you forward as opposed to keep you looking backwards.
Yes, or stuck in the same space, or doing the same pattern.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about is the patterns that keep us the same. And so we're talking about the cost of staying the same versus the cost that we might be spending for that change. Okay. So, what might those subconscious patterns be costing us financially? Because we think about the financial cost of change, but we're not thinking about the subconscious patterns that are staying the same and how that is also costing us. So, what might those subconscious patterns be costing us financially?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people aren't thinking about their subconscious patterns. Like, I know that. I talk about it, I think about it all the time because this is what I do. Most people when they think about money, they think about it in this very black and white way. They think if I just made another $20,000 a year, so I'd finally feel okay. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of time the money isn't actually the problem. The pattern is I've worked with people who are making six figures and were still terrified every time they spent money because their nervous system never learned that it was safe to have enough. So another pattern is popping into my mind. I've worked with people who undercharge because asking for more felt selfish, or people who procrastinate on launching the thing that could grow their income because visibility didn't feel safe. So I think that our patterns don't just affect how much money we make, they affect what we believe that we're worthy of receiving, how confidently we ask for it, how we manage it, and whether or not we unconsciously push it away when it finally arrives. So, what I think about in terms of that is that there are these indirect costs to these subconscious patterns. How much money have we spent trying to cope with a life that doesn't fit? Shopping because we're emotionally exhausted, ordering takeout because we're too burnt out to cook, calling off work because our body is like waving the white flag and being like, I am way too burnt out. I'm way too stressed. So we're paying for the consequences of a pattern instead of healing the pattern itself. I think that
Yeah,
sometimes we're trying so hard to save money that we never stop to ask how much the fear is already costing us. That's a very
yeah,
different question.
yeah. There are things I haven't launched for whatever reason,
Right.
but that cost me too. That fear, that staying in the same pattern, not wanting to put this thing out there for whatever reason. In the end, it costs. It has a cost, which may be greater than the cost of working with someone like you to kind of work on those patterns. So I definitely agree with that. I think about the impact it's having not just on us, but on the people around us, because it may be also be costing them if you stay the same. It may be costing them in terms of what they believe to be true about themselves and what they believe to be possible for them if all around them people are repeating the same behavior. We talked about what causes people not to calculate the cost. And I was thinking about how we're socialized and how we're socialized to, as you said, override that feeling of discomfort when we're dreading going into work, or how it's like you must have more, 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 more. So you stay later at work and you do those things, and it's almost like it then normalizes those behaviors, and then it has impacts on other people coming into that workplace or younger people that are watching of like, this is normal. And now I must also override what is true for me and not consider what it's costing me.
This is a really big one that I see, and I try to talk with a lot of my mom clients about, is that your children are always watching you. And even if you don't have children, there are people like I know both of us, we have nieces and nephews and that kind of thing who they're watching us. They're watching how we move through the world. We're always setting an example. And so we may say one thing with our mouths, it's important to do this or it's important to do that, but what are we actually doing with our action? And so I really think about it, and it's not made to make anyone feel guilty. I think that it's thinking about even the legacy example that you're leaving. So the cost could go on for generations if you are not investing in yourself in certain ways. What is the example, and what are the deposits that are you making or not making into the next generation? And so I think about people who have broken sort of those generational patterns of things. And so then their children go on to make better decisions for themselves and invest in themselves and feel like they're worthy and deserving of being invested in certain ways. And it truly does. It breaks generational patterns. And
Mhm.
that I think is something that we don't really think about when we're not investing in ourselves. We often think it just affects us, but if it affects so many people in our lives.
Yeah, and then that cost can then be carried on, as you said, to the next generation. It can be carried on to other people coming into the workplace. It can be carried on socially. We had an episode where we talked about generations early on, I think, quite a
Yeah.
few months ago, and it is that generational cost as well, and that legacy, so I definitely would agree with that. Now, one of the things I think sometimes causes people to stay the same is that they're not ready to change,
Hmm.
okay? So how do we know when we're honoring not being ready versus that almost being an excuse to stay the same without considering the cost?
I love this question because I don't actually think that waiting is always a bad thing. There's maybe not so much anymore, but in the online coaching space, there used to be this pressure to make decisions really quickly. And I feel like that often caused people to override their intuition and maybe their nervous system response. So I don't think that waiting is always a bad thing. I think waiting is wisdom. Sometimes I do feel like people genuinely need more information, more healing, some stability, more support before making a decision. And there are some seasons where forcing yourself to move faster isn't actually the best move. It's just ignoring your own capacity. But there's a difference between honoring your own timing and endlessly postponing your life. So,
Mhm.
one question that I come back to is, what am I hoping will be different if I wait? So, if your answer is something concrete, I'm saving money and that number is this, I'm finishing my degree. So, therefore, after I finish my degree, I'll have more time. I'm recovering from a surgery. So, now might not be the best time to start training for a marathon or something. That's different, something more concrete. But if you've been saying, I'll do it when I feel more confident or when I'm less scared or when I stop doubting myself, then you'll be waiting for a version of yourself that doesn't actually exist and may never exist if you don't actually take the move. I think there's a difference between something being concrete, practical, and tangible, and like knowing what you're working toward to get to that place where you can make the decision. And then I think there's waiting that allows you to wait behind it forever. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I definitely see what you mean. And like you said, I think sometimes waiting is necessary,
Mhm.
but I do like that question that you asked because it still begs the question of just understanding what this waiting is costing you.
Right.
Even if you do have to wait, because it may be benefiting you too. Like I said, if you're recovering from something, if you're waiting to save up to whatever, then you're understanding that it is costing you, but you're overriding that cost by working towards the change as opposed to postponing it. Like I don't know if you know this expression, kicking the can down the road. It's
Sure.
like just endlessly next time, next time, next time. And to me, that's when the sort of costs of staying the same starts to come into play.
And I think that our bodies actually know the difference. So when you're honoring your timing, there's usually a sense of peace, even if you're disappointed that it's not time yet. But when you're hiding, there's often this kind of knowing that keeps tapping you on the shoulder. Like you think about it all the time. You keep having the same conversation with yourself. You keep thinking about it all the time. And in some point, that stops being like, I'm just being patient with myself or I'm waiting for the right timing. It just continues to allow you to stay exactly where you are.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. So, what can a person do if they realize that they can't afford to stay the same? If they really start to understand what staying the same is costing them, what's the best way to kind of move forward from there?
Well, If people know me at all, they know that I'm probably going to say to make it smaller, not bigger. So I think that so many people think that change has to start with this massive decision or complete reinvention of their life, but lasting change usually begins with something much smaller. And that's
Mhm.
understanding what is actually happening underneath the behavior. So again, curiosity and compassion, not criticism. Can I stop shaming myself long enough to get curious about why some part of me keeps pulling me back? And I actually think that as we went back and forth in this, a really good exercise might be to look at kind of the investments that you're making in certain areas of your life and then what that's costing you in other areas of your life. So
Mhm.
maybe it's like you have a column in a notebook where you write down what you are actually investing your time in, and then what is that costing you in the other areas of your life. And then maybe you're thinking about making an investment. And so often people just look at the financial piece of things. But what if you branched off and you looked at, okay, if I invested, I'll give you myself for an example. I have my OBM who works with me, and it's an investment. It's a bigger investment that I've ever made in a VA or an OBM role.
Mhm.
But when I look at how much I get back from that in terms of my time, my energy, my peace, my health, my attention, all of that far outweighs the cost or the investment that I'm making. So sometimes if it's a monetary thing, it might be this is how much this costs, but how much will it save me or give me back in terms of these other areas?
Yeah, and then you could think to yourself, "Well, actually, you have this OBM now. It has saved you time and energy and peace of mind and creativity, and that has then allowed you to maybe invent your app or something like you would not have
Of
had
the
time to
podcast.
have a podcast," that type of thing. So I think sometimes it will then also have that knock-on effect.
Right. Exactly. And then it might also be helpful, like I said, on the other side of things, to look at where am I investing a lot, but what might that be costing me in other areas of my life? I think it can be really helpful to see things down on paper sometimes and really see it spelled out for you.
Yeah, there are a number of exercises that you can sort of find out there online, and there's some where you have a circle and you have the different areas of your life. So it could be your health, it could be your relationships, it could be work, it could be creativity, education, all of those things. And you can look at how much emphasis are you putting on one area versus another. And so that, as you said, it can be a really sort of tangible way of just seeing it right in front of you. Like I've got 100% invested into my work. I'm like, actually, I haven't really invested any time into my health, or I'm not really putting any time into my creative project, but yet suddenly I feel like I want to play the guitar by the end of the year. I'm talking to myself now, that type of thing. So I definitely think it's sometimes it is good to just see it on paper and start to understand where you may be able to shift the balance of cost or understand the cost so that you can maybe make a different choice.
You can make a different investment. Because I also feel like most people have this kind of niggling thing in the back of their mind where most people know exactly where they need to invest more in their life. And so I think that this is like step one is the awareness piece. But I think that then there's the step two of why do you keep avoiding it, delaying it, overthinking it, sabotaging it? And I think that it's really hard to change a pattern that you can't clearly see or understand. And so that's the next layer is if there's something that you know that you want to invest in or an area of your life that you want to invest in, but you keep stopping yourself from doing it. I want to invite you to please go and take your subconscious pattern assessment at spottheblock.app where you will answer a few questions about the block you're experiencing. And the app has been trained on my exact methodology that I use with all of my clients. And it will create a personalized hidden block report just for you to help you better understand your block and your pattern and give you your next steps for moving past it. Your first report is completely free. So again, that's spottheblock.app or click the link in the show notes to access it. Sophia, anything else that you want to say before we wrap up today?
No, I think that was a great way to have a think about as you said, those hidden costs, what it's costing you to stay the same.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that this conversation was really helpful in helping you see that so many times it's bigger than just the money. There is a cost to everything, and to see what it's costing you to not invest in yourself in some way. All right. We're sending you so much love and gratitude. Until next time. Bye.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to send me a message on social media. I'm at the Allie Rose on both Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to be coached on a future episode or explore what it would look like to work with me one-on-one, head over to shiftyourstorypodcast.com. And if you never want to miss an episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review. It helps more people find this work. Until next time, keep shifting, keep growing, and most importantly, I want you to remember that your story isn't set in stone. You always have the power to shift it.